grand scheme of a tunnel. So it was built in 1910, right?
Mm-hmm.
And someone somewhere said this tunnel that was built in 1910 is at the end of its life in 2030.
Mm-hmm.
And we're at 2025 and they're still using it. Is quite wild. Like you're in like the last 5% or whatever that works out to be of its operational life.
Going back to our younger selves, were you a crammer before exams?
Yes. Yeah.
This is your spirit animal then. This is your spirit project.
Yeah, it makes it exciting. Like a 48-hour dissertation, right? 2 days before it's due in.
Can we get this tunnel built before we have catastrophic failure of the other one? Ooh, yeah. Let's find out. Join us next time. Welcome back to the Offsite Podcast. I'm Jason Lancini, joining from Germany with about 7 hours sleep, joined once again by Carlos Cavallo from London. And Carlos, you're running on what, 2-3 hours sleep?
Yeah, just downing my coffee at the moment to get pumped up for this.
The parties are wild in London is the takeaway message off the top.
Kids are totally worth it for anyone.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be funny if he listens to this in the future.
Yeah. I was going to say in the future when I look old and I have no hair, but too late.
All right, we've got 3 things we're going to dive into today, all of which are really interesting and were fun to research. So first, we're looking at America's most urgent infrastructure project, the Hudson Tunnel, which is connecting New Jersey and New York. We're going to dive into a provocative and entertaining question from LinkedIn about should contractors be concerned when tech vendors offer suspiciously low prices? And then, at least interesting to one person that either hosts or listens to the podcast, is Brisbane in Australia, which has recently released its Olympic delivery plan with major changes to the venue and the original strategy. So we'll dive straight into that. Carlos, how are you feeling, mate? Ready to dive into some detail?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was in a similar spot to you yesterday with lack of sleep due to younger ones, but last night I got my required 6.5. Feeling great.
You really appreciate the nights where you get like unbroken sleep.
You would trade everything for that, I think.
Yeah. I need to do a few more international site tours just to get those 2 nights in a hotel.
2 nights in a hotel. Yeah, like the ideal night out for me is a night away in a hotel, 2 melatonin tablets,
dressing gown, slippers,
and blackout curtains.
Yeah. Maybe we'll go see the Hudson River. That's a solid.
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah, 100%. You know, they always say like, "What would you go and tell your younger self? Anything?" I'd go back and tell my like 18-year-old self, like enjoy the sleep, dude.
Yeah. I think though, I don't think I could have slept much more than I did back then. But
took it for granted.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't appreciate it. That's for sure.
Were you a like sleep in till midday type of person?
Early teens, I did.
Early teens. I was always up like relatively early. I'd never had I always envied people that could do the big sleep.
12 to 14 hour sleeps were routine.
Get out of here. Really?
Yeah, 100%. It's good for your development. I've probably got some. That was my argument.
Yeah, exactly. I've probably got some
really
development issues as a result.
Yeah. Oh, those are the days.
Cool. Shall we dive in off the top? Hudson Tunnel. So for some background, beneath the Hudson River in the US lies what many consider America's most critical infrastructure vulnerability. This topic is something that we are diving into because our team that write the Offsite newsletter, they have just released a deep dive on this project, and I found it super interesting to dive into. For background, the North River Tunnel, which was built in 1910, serves as the only rail connection between New Jersey and New York's Penn Station. It handles about 450 trains and 200,000 passengers daily. Since 2012, when Hurricane Sandy flooded it with salt water, the tunnel has been gradually deteriorating at an increasingly alarming pace, basically. And so after what feels like ridiculously long time of proposals, cancellations, and politics, like any infrastructure project, there is a $16 billion Hudson Tunnel Project that has finally secured full funding and has broken ground. Effectively, the project's going to construct a new 2-track tunnel under the Hudson. Then it will also rehabilitate the existing tunnel and connect Penn Station via the Hudson Yards development. So 3 sections in one. Carlos, given that background of the time between the reason this is urgent because of this hurricane in 2012 to now, any thoughts on how urgent this really is?
Time. Yeah. I think just to reiterate how needed it is, irrespective of the actual damage that's happening and the need to, secure this rail connection. At the moment, they only have these single track tubes.
Mm-hmm.
They're quite limited in terms of capacity, but every time one of those 2 tubes effectively is stopped because of damage or leakage, by managing one tube, which is you can imagine like a 1 in, 1 out policy, the capacity goes down by 75%. So it's a massive issue when they lose one of those. Yeah, very much needed. And obviously it's New York. You'd expect pretty modern, sophisticated infrastructure.
And they've had 85 occurrences of that happening in the last, I can't remember, handful of years. That 75% reduction that happens is a not insignificant frequency. So it's there's that bit that's tying to the urgency, but I think the other bit that ties in the urgency is that there is a report that said if it goes beyond 2030 without rehabilitation, it's at risk of catastrophic failure.
In the grand scheme of a tunnel, so it was built in 1910, right?
Mm-hmm.
And someone somewhere said this tunnel that was built in 1910 is at the end of its life in 2030. Mm-hmm. And we're at 2025 and they're still using it is quite wild. You're in the last 5% or whatever that works out to be of its operational life.
Going back to our younger selves, were you a crammer before exams?
Yes. Yeah.
This is your spirit animal then. This is your spirit project.
Yeah, it makes it exciting. Like a 48-hour dissertation, right? 2 days before it's due in.
Can we get this tunnel built before we have catastrophic failure of the other one? Ooh, let's find out. Join us next time.
Yeah. But it is wild that they're like, oh yeah, we probably have 5 more years, so let's keep passing trains filled with passengers through these tunnels for now.
I think it's like it is even though I'm joking, it is kind of like the story of all political things that happen. It's like the same as climate change, right? It's like until you've got an impending catastrophic failure or doomsday event, people will just kind of be like, maybe we should look at it from another angle, or should we delay it and investigate it another way?
Yeah, squeeze every last bit of value out of that. Yeah.
Interestingly, the project is almost fully funded, 12 out of the 16 billion from federal funding. The reason for that, I'm guessing, is that some very, very large percentage of the US GDP basically travels through this Northeast corridor that it's part of. So a big contribution from federal government there.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a huge, obviously, push on ramping up infrastructure and spend in the US at the moment. So yeah, all systems go on that front. From a scope point of view, they've broken it up into sort of classic packages that you would expect. They've got contractors running tunnels, which is either the new tunnel or I guess the refurb of the existing. They've got, obviously, you've got the portals and you've got some sort of onshore works around those areas. So kind of a classic split of contracts that you would expect from a project like this. I went a little bit deep on ground stabilization.
Okay, cool.
Mostly because it's something I know nothing about.
That's why you didn't sleep last night. It's nothing to do with the
I was up looking
I was
at
engrossed.
So there was it's the bottom of the Hudson River is like a very I guess soft. Someone described it as chocolate pudding. So a very soft like bed to the river. For me, it seemed like a very difficult task to stabilize ground that's under quite a significant river. Like it's not a small one. Like how do they actually go about doing it? What are they actually trying to do? Because the TBMs are launched onshore. So you always
Yep.
assume they just go deep enough that they're not in the super unstable ground.
Yep.
But a couple of potential methods look quite interesting. So have you ever come across ground freezing before?
I've heard of it before. I've never been on a project that has used it.
Yeah, really interesting. So they drill pipes through the ground, and it can take weeks to months for the process to actually complete. But then they funnel through effectively like a coolant, and in some cases liquid nitrogen, which then actually freezes the ground around you. So the TBM can then pass through and cut through something that's solid rather than what is almost liquid.
Okay, so stabilization for the process of getting a TBM.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I was thinking the classic methods will be like drilled or driven piles, and you would presumably do that around the path of the TBM because you don't want the TBM crashing through everything that you've put into the ground. But that must be quite difficult to do under a huge river, using my very limited knowledge in this space. But yeah, the freezing is pretty cool. Yeah, why not freeze something to then cut through?
Why not? There's an interesting, so there's a package that is let inside of the project is $200 and almost a $300 million dollar effort to basically do ground stabilization, which was awarded, I think, back in 2024. So this scope is underway.
Weeks Marine, I think was the company.
Yeah. I looked into, from what I understand, there are basically two phases to the process where they're effectively piloting different stabilization methods. So I think I read that there's also a trial happening with deep soil mixing as a method where they're effectively building like a temporary cofferdam to dewater, and then they're doing a kind of you take existing soil, mix it with cement and water, and put it back in, which I think is a trial that is happening. It's happening now, as far as I can tell. So I don't know if it's like in addition to the Mr. Freeze approach, or it's for a different section of the project.
The Mr. Freeze approach definitely isn't something that's happening. It was one of the sort of, there's a bunch of methods we can go for. I just got into a hole in that one because it looked pretty interesting.
It feels like it would be pretty hard to freeze the ground is attached to a whole bunch of water. So I'd imagine it constantly wants to not be frozen. I'd get, it feels like a lot of energy to kind of freeze.
And quite a distance. Weeks Marine is a subsidiary of Kiewit, by the way. So So I think the first package released was to do with utilities diversions. That started late 23, quite a while back, with an expected completion date this year. You've got the Hudson Yards concrete, I guess, factory being built as of late 23, due to finish next year. I haven't looked into the details of that, but the potentially segments for the tunnels itself. We've got the stabilization package that we just mentioned. We've got the actual tunnel packages. I'm going to assume this is pronounced Siobhan Gigardos Lane JV.
I'll let you roll. I'll let you roll that, but it looks Italian to me, which would make it a Schiavone.
Schiavone. Yeah, okay.
I think it would be a hard C if it's a CH. So I think Schiavone, but someone will correct.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the Palisades Tunnel. The Manhattan Tunnel is Frontier Kemper Tudor Perini that we've mentioned before. And then there is the Hudson River Tunnel Project, which is actually not let yet. But there's a short
the three,
like
JV, Skanska, Dragados, FCC. Yeah, okay. So basically big players.
The classic, tunneling contractors. So, massive program of works, kind of just starting to ramp up at the moment. And then once that main tunnel package gets awarded, it'll be in full swing. Yep.
Certainly one to watch, and certainly an interesting project if I was thinking about where I might want to go if I was thinking about doing a project overseas at some point.
Yeah,
Be
they
a
don't
lot
get that
to
much
learn.
better, really.
So yeah, cool project, and a shout out to the team at Aphex that pulled together the Offsite newsletter this week. A really good read on the topic. Cool. Should we move on? Topic number 2 is from a LinkedIn post that we were talking about offline. To give some context, I guess in this recent LinkedIn post, it basically sparked a discussion around pricing of construction technology, how contractors should view construction technology companies and their pricing. I'll kind of précis or summarize the post. The gist of it is that the question is, should contractors care about the profitability and pricing of the vendors that they engage? The argument basically made out that if you choose your vendors based on price, as a construction contractor, you may basically choose the one that is most likely to go out of business, and the results of that is effectively that you might have data captured or workflows that you no longer have a tool for. Basically, at risk of some element of disarray inside the organization. That then triggered a follow-on post from someone else, which started to vent their frustrations about how so many construction software companies price too cheaply. And in fact, some of them give away, free trials or very low pricing at kind of introductory rates. You might even class it as a loss leader in order to start working with contractors. I'll leave it there because they're actually kind of two different topics, even though the posts kind of related to each other. What are your thoughts on the idea of how should contractors think about pricing and profitability of the software vendors? And then whether you want to touch the other topic of giving away free trials or very low pricing for introductory rates is a good or a bad thing.
Yeah, it's there's obviously this constant trade-off. If you put yourself in the shoes of the general contractor or main contractor, you're going to be thinking about the trade-off between innovation and stability. If you always err on the side of stability, there's probably an argument to say the big software vendors are not innovating at pace as a pool of startups who have the freedom and agility to go and do things and experiment and sort of push the boundaries. The big players, they have their foot in the market, they've got control, and they're probably very focused on sort of slowly building out the big set of tools that are well used and distributed. So there's that sort of immediate sort of choice. If we think about for the smaller vendors or organizations looking to penetrate these markets, you are up against people that have pretty strong control over their market. They are probably selling suites of tools. And within those suites of tools, there will be other tools that they produce and are sort of experimenting with that probably throw them in for free with their own version of free tools without any sort of revenue being generated, which forces contractors to go, well, we're kind of already paying for these, so let's try and make it work because there's no additional cost to the business. Is probably the view of the head office IT procurement teams. Whereas if you speak to site, they probably just want what's cheapest and best for them. So you've got lots of conflicting views. There's gives and takes at every side of the sort of coin. But ultimately, it comes down to how do you really grab those early adopters with as fewer hurdles as possible. So the idea that you're coming in with low or no cost solutions, it's hard to break away from why that is a valid method to capture some sort of market to then prove that your tool works or provides value to then use that as a jumping off point to grow.
It is or isn't. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I followed. It is. So yeah, you're you would say it's to summarize from the contractor, from the software company's perspective, you would say it's a valid strategy.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And then from the contractor side, how would you go? Be wary or yeah.
Well, if we just think through the reality of small vendor targeting, say, a project or small cohort of individuals, you want to effectively start to get eyes and some sort of traction before you have to deal with the big IT teams that will naturally block a new startup because they don't have certifications or they don't have, like, there's other tools they've already purchased, and you're then doubling down on cost,
Yep.
and there's all sorts of factors at play. So
Yep.
to get that early recognition or
traction and validation. So
yeah,
so
exactly.
That's
Yeah.
like definitely. So you're definitely tripling down into like valid from the software company's perspective. How would you look at it if you're the contractor though?
Depends who you are within the contractor, right?
Yeah.
You want a risk-free punt on something, so they
a
obviously
classic
love,
risk-free punt.
yeah,
The all
Yeah.
upside, no downside option.
yeah. It's I guess from an adoption point of view, if you're the contractor, you're probably aware of, I guess, undermining products that you're paying for. So you've already got this like control problem when projects are just using tools all over the place, and you're trying to probably think about things from an operational point of view of like processes and controls, reporting, and everything that you want to hit from the top.
Let me give. I've got thoughts and opinions on the topic. So I guess I'll reveal what I think, and then we can go back and forth on it. There's basically two parts to it. One is the question of like, should contractors care about the profitability of their vendors? The second is it a good idea to use kind of low or cheap pricing to establish relationships with contractors? On the first point, I think there's some like fundamental truths that we can probably all acknowledge. One is that like construction and contracting is a low margin, high risk business. So margins are thin, price matters. General contractors buy almost all the things that they buy based on price, especially in infrastructure or major civil infrastructure. And I've seen some analysis that kind of says that there's a little bit more relationship bit involved as you go kind of like down into the smaller project. So contractors have muscle memory of choosing lowest cost vendor for anything. I think it's also true that contractors don't want to buy something that's going to go out of business. It is like a loss of faith in the organization because you've probably done a whole bunch of operational change. You have the risk of your data gets captured in this solution that you don't know if they're going to close abruptly or in an organized manner. And then you've got the job of like, what do we do in place of this thing from that day forward? I think it's also true that a lot of the innovation and impact is coming from smaller companies before it's going to the bigger companies. So as you kind of pointed out at the start, there is some trade-off there. And I think it's also true that bigger companies equal bigger prices. So you're to a degree paying for the, I guess, stability piece. I think if I looked at it from the contractor's perspective, I'd be thinking about what are the risks and benefits. And one of the biggest risks I'd be thinking about, and we talk to contractors about this all the time, is they're very conscious of big software vendor lock-in. As you kind of pointed out, we've got some free tool or some tool that is inside of a suite of tools or some inside of the suite I can use or I can purchase from this big company vendor. If you make that decision repeatedly to buy the next tool within that one suite of the one of the big vendors, you're effectively becoming like a captured customer, because every incremental one that you add, it's harder to get out of that thing. And you have no control over what pricing does in the future. I got phone calls from all sorts of people, I think a year and a half ago, when one of the big construction management platforms decided to up their prices by 400% for that one company.
Not to mention the impact on the teams for being forced to use inferior tools and the cost of that.
Yeah, for sure. But if I look at it at like an executive level of the company, I'm thinking about like big vendor lock-in risk is one of the things that comes up a lot. And then you kind of have to do this risk assessment of like, well, what happens if they do shut down? I don't think all workflows or tools or processes inside of a company are created equally. If it's like how you pay your supply chain, the answer to what happened if it did shut down, the vendor that you're using, is a totally different answer to some other workflow. So I think there's like some cost benefit risk thing that you kind of take into play. And so I would say that if I was the contractor, I would definitely be wary of big vendor lock-in. I would think about the risk of going with a smaller vendor through the eyes of like, is the reason I'm choosing them or my team want to choose them because they're doing something unique that delivers us some value? Because if the answer is yes, there's probably value for other contractors that look like us in the industry, which probably means that vendor will continue to grow and be successful and be in business. On the other side, are we choosing this vendor because it does the thing that something else does, but it's cheaper? Like it's the cheaper way to do whatever workflow that already exists in some other platform. Then I'd have a little bit of alarm bells ringing because at that point there, if the only differentiation is price, then there is the risk that that software vendor doesn't last, goes out of business, whatever. Contractors should be wary of both sides. Going with the small vendor and it not existing in the future, but also making every decision to avoid that takes you down the path of being a captured customer of big vendor. On the separate topic of whether or not construction software companies should have low introductory pricing for pilots or for small teams or whatever, I think that other social post is just having a whinge.
Yeah. Tell us what you really think comment would have gone down well, but I did leave that one. Also the first one, in terms of like, you should go for profitable companies. That is a bit of a silly statement as well. Like Procore doesn't produce a profit, but they're a massive company, huge revenue, and you would argue they're still stable in inverted commas. But yeah, I do think it would be really interesting to understand how teams internally actually sort of evaluate the stability of a company, because we know how, in some cases, little information they actually ask for in terms of financial checks. Until you're a certain size of a public company, there's not that much that you can actually find online in terms of, let's say, revenue and aspects like that. So I definitely bet they see a demo, they go, okay, cool, this actually does offer, like you say, something that we don't currently have. We can see longevity because they get it. There's definitely one side of that. And the other, there's the aura is the wrong word. You try and generate that presence and the case studies and the logos to validate, look, we are working everywhere, and that makes that decision process much easier for any contractor to then sign up to a vendor. But yeah, it's an interesting one because, like I think you mentioned the other day, what's the difference with one of the big vendors discontinuing a tool that's actually used by contractors? Is that as much of a disruption to one of the
I didn't. I didn't even bring that up, but like we've seen many examples where a big software vendor has some tool or part of their suite that doesn't get the adoption
widely used.
Yeah, which is widely used. And because it's a big vendor, the cost based on maintaining that piece of software is way higher than it would have been for the small vendor. The progression and the way that they develop the tool is way slower than it would have been for the smaller vendor because they're fully focused on it. And there's actually like a higher risk that some of those things can fail. And then they do that thing in big vendor, which is like constantly like making stuff like, oh, this is part of our legacy platform, or we've now bought some other thing and this thing's no longer going to be supported and you have to move to this next version. Like, yeah, you have all of that risk at the big vendor. So I think the real truth of it all is like, can I see the piece of software or technology I'm going to use actually deliver value in a unique way that I think the industry will increasingly adopt? Because whether that's inside a big company or a small company, that thing has potential to be around for the longest period of time. Because yeah, both small companies can go out of business, and we see big companies, whether they're blue, orange, red, whatever the color is, they also discontinue their tools, and you're in exactly the same spot, just paying a lot more for it. Exactly the same spot, but you paid a shitload more money for it.
Yeah, and probably way harder to retrieve your data and everything else that you want in the back end. Good
LinkedIn post. All right, final topic before we run out of time. I've been wanting to get to this as a Brisbane expat local. Well, you still live in Brisbane. I don't know how to say that in another way. After more than 1,000, talking about the topic of waiting to the last minute to do a project, if I call back to the Hudson Tunnel one, after more than 1,340 days since winning the bid to host the 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games, Queensland has finally unveiled its official delivery plan. So we've used most of the time.
They must have designed it. That's design done, right? Perfect world.
No, we've unveiled the delivery plan. Here's how we're going to do it. It was released on the 25th of March 25, and it outlines approximately 7 billion Australian dollar venue capital works program, with the design to extend the benefit of the games throughout Queensland, so not just in the capital of Brisbane, and is a significant shift from earlier proposals. Most controversially, the plan abandons the renovation of a 130-year-old historic Gabba cricket stadium in favour for a new 63,000-seat Brisbane stadium at a nearby location called Victoria Park. So a bunch of things to go on here. There's the waiting so long just to get the plan in place piece. There is also, just as like an Olympics fan, the idea of like an Olympics in a city versus a broader region. How do you feel about either of those topics?
In terms of the timeline, if we compare it to London Olympics, yes, there's a substantial difference in terms of construction starting after bid awarded. I think London was a couple of years, and this is something like 5. But the time left to actually build everything is the same, 5 years. So as long as they were super productive in this 5-year planning phase, arguably they could be better.
You are showing your hand of like, I like to cram. 5 years, it's totally fine.
Yeah, way more exciting. But I actually I had no idea. I did. This is me being naive to the news, but I didn't realize it was a multi-city, or I guess a Queensland bid, because there's a good couple of thousand miles between Brisbane and Cairns.
Yeah, this is a bit that stood out to me. Like, as a Brisbane local, I didn't think most of Brisbane knows it was a statewide games. I thought that the city had the games. It seems like a fundamentally different feeling of an Olympic Games if the things are kind of not roughly co-located. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, because you often have, like the London as an example, it's this like concentrated mixing pot of everything happening in one space, which you like will build excitement, will make it feel like a big thing. Whereas this could almost feel like the sport that happens every weekend in different locations. It's like you're very much just going to sporting events without maybe the feeling of obviously around the main stadium in Brisbane, you would expect it to have that feeling, but it would be odd to go to one of the other cities to go and view a sporting event. I guess you lose that kind of buzz and that feeling of excitement of the games, because you're just watching a game. To give a really terrible analogy.
There are venue investments happening in Brisbane, Rockhampton, Toowoomba, Townsville, and Cairns. And for those that don't know small city Australian geography, it'd be something like saying Rome is hosting the games, but Rome is deciding to have one of the events in London.
Yeah, yeah. It's actually the same distance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're a long way away. Obviously, there's probably some benefit here of like spreading infrastructure investment across the state. That makes a lot of sense, but it feels like, therefore, the whole thing is about infrastructure investment and less about like the quality of the games.
Yeah, there does seem to be, obviously within this is a bunch of infrastructure upgrades, which I'm going to assume is all primarily focused in Brisbane. Just trying to find the list. I had it a second ago.
While you dig that up, either way, I think we've talked about this in the past, and I think it'll come up again and again as this 5 years becomes 4, 3, 2, etc. There is a definitely significant labor shortage. They need 30 to 40,000 workers until 2032. It's one of the most cost-inflated states to do construction at the moment. The Olympics are not known for delivering things on budget. So it'd be interesting to keep track of this $7 billion budget that was announced to see where that actually ends up.
As I'm saying this, I cannot find the list of infrastructure projects, but there was a bunch of railroad schemes to support the games. So yeah, at least
stay tuned next week. No, there definitely is. So there's there's a rail service between Brisbane and the Gold Coast, which is being built, and part of it has already been awarded. So there's a Brisbane to Gold Coast faster rail. There is a Brisbane to Sunshine Coast rail link that is being built. There are Cairns roads upgrades. There's stadium and venue upgrades across the state as well. There's like at Toowoomba, they're turning the showgrounds into an equestrian centre of excellence. Toowoomba is a good couple of hours drive inland from Brisbane. The attendees of these games are going to be travelling some significant distances to. Someone should do the carbon analysis and like the impact analysis on just, basically what the cost of that's going to be. I think the airlines will be very, very happy.
The islands will be happy, yeah. If you've got a bunch of tickets and you're flying between these cities, they're going to be
100%. Yeah. So I think, takeaways is I think it's left very late in the day. Carlos thinks it's fine. Totally can do it. What's also interesting is, this venue that they're building in Victoria Park, I think they're going to demolish either way, they're demolishing the Gabba. I think it was locked in, didn't have enough space. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly this plan, including the budget, starts getting actually awarded, because I think we're still in early design phase for a lot of this stuff. At least talking to contractors and where things are at. So super interesting. I know we're out of time, mate. Do you want to read us out and wrap?
Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning into today's show. If you did enjoy today's episode, please do think about liking this video or following us on your chosen podcast platform. We really appreciate your support, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye.